Thank you all so much for joining this afternoon to for our exciting webinar today, where we're really going to talk about some of the conversational analytics capabilities inside of Microsoft Teams. And what's exciting about this is, the idea of meeting your business users where they are and the tools that they live in, day out. They're messaging with colleagues, and they want to interact with and ask questions in a natural language of their business, of their data. And we'll talk about that today. But before jumping in, I want to cover what the topics are that we'll discuss today. So I'm excited to be joined by Noah and Nick, and we'll do some introductions momentarily. Following that, we're going to do we're going to talk about one of our customers, USLBM, and the success across their business and several hundred users to deliver the types of capabilities with Snowflake Intelligence and Microsoft Teams. Following that, we're going to talk about some of the data governance, security types of capabilities and things to be mindful of as you're looking to bring this solution to bear within your organization. And then Nick will spend several minutes talking about where the platform's going, what Snowflake is doing to continue to invest in these tools and capabilities from an AI standpoint, but also from a standpoint of what does that experience look like to continue to meet users where they are, to give them the ability to interrogate and ask questions, again, in a natural language of their data sets. And with that, let's go into some introductions. So I'm Joe Fortino. I'm one of the managing partners here with Seven Rivers. Fortunate, again, to be joined by Noah and Nick. Noah, I'll pass it your way.
Thank you, Joe. So my name is Noah Villanueva. I am a consultant here at Seven Rivers. My focus is on data engineering and artificial intelligence. I'll pass it on to Nick now for his intro.
Thank you, Noah. Thank you, Joe. I'm really excited to be here. So I'm Nick Reyes, and I lead product marketing for AI-powered BI here at Snowflake. Before I set the stage, let me give you some quick context on why I'm so passionate about this space, because it is personal. I spent the last decade at the intersection of data and scale. Earlier in my career, I saw firsthand how organizations were moving their data to the cloud. Then I got to watch the other side of how users were still struggling to get answers from that data, even after billions of dollars were spent migrating it. And I kept seeing the same pattern everywhere. The data was there, it was in the cloud, but the meaning of the data, the definitions, the metrics, the business logic was stuck downstream, locked in disconnected BI tools that only a handful of people could use. The industry calls this your semantic layer. And for years, it's been pushed far right, away from your data into tooling that creates bottlenecks instead of eliminating them. That gap where data lives and where its meaning lives is the reason why I joined Snowflake. We believe the fix is moving your semantics left directly into the platform, right next to where your data lives, one governed source of truth that every tool, every agent, and every team can tap into. By getting that foundation right is only half the story. The other half is how people actually interact with it, and that's what I'll come back to in a bit. I'm going to pass it back to you, Joe.
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate it, Nick, and it's a great segue for two reasons. First and foremost, as somebody who has led, sales teams and representing a go-to-market, I think a lot about the world through the data, both at my fingertips that, historically, to your point, it's like, well, I need to go to NetSuite or Salesforce or some single application, but that's only a piece of the data. If I want to think about the products and SKU mix, and if I want to think about revenue, invoicing, and broader, both bookings, revenue, returns, liabilities, like there's bigger pieces of data that live outside of the traditional like CRM that sales leaders live in. And when we think about USLBM, the premise of our relationship or the kind of philosophical problem that they wanted to solve for is having hundreds of sales individuals and regional sales leaders wanting to ask questions of their data and giving them an ability to do that in a simple and easy way. Over the last many years, like probably many folks here on our webinar, have spent a lot of time, effort, and money investing in Snowflake as a data platform. But the data foundation and historical BI is kind of just the beginning. Where the world's going, what Snowflake is continuing to do is give the ability for folks like me and folks like some of our leaders here at USLBM, the ability to ask questions of the data that doesn't just come out of that Salesforce or CRM, but rather their entire business. So you can understand what were our bookings in the Eastern region last month? And where does that stand relative to forecast? And what's kind of our percentage? Where are there risks in the business? And those are some of the challenges that USLBM faced that we were excited to sit down and problem solve with them. So if I back up a step again and I think about the core problem that they were seeking to solve for, the sales function, the sales leaders, and if we don't mind going to the next slide here, those leaders were really seeking an ability to get data that they kind of theoretically had at their fingertips, but it didn't show up in a report or a dashboard inside of a minute, inside of a day, but rather it was like, hey, I've got to go find this report. I've got to look across 4 different ones. Then I've got to ask a sales analyst to go help with some other data. And the problem that led to is a bottleneck within their organization to deliver data and insights, again, to their sales leaders that were sitting in front of customers, understanding where were they with their kind of bookings to date relative to the account plans that they agreed to, and give them the capabilities to see that in action with the ability to talk to it. So we sat down with them, ideated on some different ways. And when we recognized that, their sales leaders are sitting on Zoom calls and not Zoom calls, but Teams calls, and they're meeting with customers. Well, wouldn't it make sense if we delivered that experience where they're already working and spending a good amount of their day? So that was kind of the premise and thing that we sought to solve for. Now, Nick, I want to pass it back to you because you set the stage earlier relative to data foundation and moving the semantic model out of BI in that world that it lived in for the last, decade plus, and moving that to the left inside of Snowflake. So I'd love if you can spend a few minutes talking about that.
I sure can. Thanks, Joe. You know what's interesting is every conversation I've had with data leaders sounds exactly like what you just described. The definitions don't agree. The dashboards launched but gathered dust. And the real decisions, the ones that are happening in the hallways and group chats, those are happening without data entirely. But let me show you how we solve for these problems. There's 3 layers to this, and they work together as a stack. The first layer, as you can see, is semantic views, Snowflake semantic views. This is the foundation, and it directly solves the consistency problem. Semantic views are native schema level objects inside Snowflake that store your business meaning of your data, your metric definitions, your join paths, your aggregation rules, your dimensional hierarchies. They're not an external modeling tool or a separate metadata layer. They live right next to your tables inside your database, fully governed by the same role-based access control and row-level security and replication you already use. What that means practically, you define gross margin once in one place, and every downstream consumer, whether it's a BI tool, an AI agent, or an SQL query, gets the same answer. No more which dashboard is right, no more conflicting spreadsheets, one governed definition enforced at the platform level. We recently launched Semantic View Autopilot, so you don't have to start from scratch. It reads your query history, understands your usage patterns, and generates the semantic layer for you. Days of modeling work turned into just minutes. Now the next layer is on the next slide, which is Cortex agents. So Cortex agents, this is the reasoning engine. Cortex agents takes natural language and turns it into accurate, governed SQL, grounded by semantic views. When someone asks, what were my top 10 accounts by margin last month? The agent reads the semantic definition, understands the business context, and generates the query. No SQL knowledge required on the user's end. Think of Cortex agents as the engine, and Snowflake Intelligence is the full conversational experience built on top of it. Purpose-built for business users to interact with their data through conversation. They both support multi-turn conversations. You ask a follow-up, like break that down by region, and it carries context forward. And critically, every single query respects the same row-level security and RBAC that your data team configured. The sales rep only sees their data, the branch manager only sees their branches. Now, finally, this is the third layer in the stack. And this is the part that I really want you to sit with. It's the direct integrations. Here's where our industry has gotten it wrong for a long time. We keep building analytics tools and asking people to come to us, open this portal, learn this interface, bookmark this URL. But Joe showed us the core problem with this. The tool launches, nobody shows up, and decisions are made without data, time and time again. We believe your AI agent shouldn't be a destination you visit. It should be a teammate that lives exactly where your actual team is. Think about where your team are spending their day. They're not in a terminal. They're not in a BI portal. They're in collaboration tools such as Teams, Slack, and the apps they have already opened or they already have open. And in this case, if the data isn't in Teams, they're making the decisions without it. We built a native Cortex agent integration that embeds directly into Teams. Your data agent shows up in the same sidebar as your colleagues. You ask it a question, it responds with a governed answer. Right there, right in the conversation. Multi-turn conversation, charts, role-based security, enforced at every query. The same agent you configure in Snowflake Intelligence works identically in Teams. This is how you solve the adoption problem. You don't launch another tool and hope people show up. You bring insights directly into the workflow they're already in. Zero behavior change required. That's the stack. Semantic views defines the truth. Cortex agents reason over it, and then Teams delivers it where people actually work. I'm going to pass it back to Noah now.
Yeah, and I'll just jump in super quickly here, Nick. I think you hit on arguably the most important piece of this again is delivering it where the users are. And so often when companies have been investing in their data and looking at new advanced BI tools across the tech stack and ecosystem, now you have to start to think about adoption, change management, enablement, and by leveraging the tools in which they're already using to give them the ability to talk to, interrogate data, you're meeting them where they are. And it solves for so many of those kind of change enablement questions and challenges, because again, they already know how to start a message inside of Microsoft Teams. So no, I'd love if you could spend a few minutes here talking about that premise of an idea and how we brought that to bear for our customer.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Joe. So speaking a little bit more to the project that we did for USLBM and how we solved their specific problems, utilizing that Cortex stack that Nick just talked over. When we started the project, USLBM already had a solid data foundation. They had a well thought out schema and tables ready to go with useful information. But their problem was that their data engineers and analysts were swamped with ad hoc query requests from folks on the business side, both at a corporate level and also at a retail level who were selling to customers and ensuring that they received the supplies that they ordered. Utilizing the Cortex agents, we were able to build them a natural language querying agent and a conversational analytics solution that would take a natural language question, such as what were my sales last quarter, and then write the SQL and execute it to get that data for that business user and then present it back to them. This is something that we took time with their engineering team and their business folks to ensure that it fit their needs and answered questions utilizing their definitions and their business terminology. This solution is really good as is, but sort of as both Joe and Nick alluded to earlier, we need to take the next step and bring it to where they're already doing work. USLBM has hundreds of people who could benefit from this, but the thing is they're all distributed and it would take a significant amount of time to onboard them onto a new tool, such as the native Snowflake Intelligence webpage, where most interactions with Cortex agents happen. But utilizing the new Microsoft Teams integration, we were able to take it to where they were already doing their work. USLBM is a Microsoft shop, so they already had plenty of users who were utilizing MS Teams on a daily basis to communicate with their colleagues. So bringing that into the MS Teams environment, they could chat with the Cortex agent and ask questions and get insights about their data, all without ever leaving their existing workflow. Now, this freed up data engineers and analysts to build more long-term solutions and no longer need to address those ad hoc query data requests as the same frequency as before. And as you can imagine, with so many more people having access to query data, but now using natural language, that suddenly makes governance and monitoring far more important. Now, built into Snowflake, there's already some tools which we were able to utilize for providing USLBM with a monitoring solution. Baked into the Cortex agents page on Snowsite is a tab that provides a table of all the responses and conversations that an agent has been having with users. But as you can imagine, with a lot of users, in a large company, that can get really cumbersome to work with. So what we did was we were able to take the table that view sourced from and build it out into a custom dashboard solution within Snowsight that would aggregate and visualize all sorts of different metrics about user usage. This enabled USLBM to get a much better high-level view of what their users were asking and what their experience was like. And then say if they saw any potential issues they wanted to correct, they could then dive into the table itself and look into the JSON output of the Cortex agent thought process and figure out what those issues were and debug them and provide their users with a fixed version and a much cleaner overall experience.
That's great. Thanks, Noah. And I'll share with everybody here. We've got some results I'll talk about momentarily, but two things to note. First, as a little teaser, we're going to show this live in another minute or so. So bear with us in just a moment while we share that. But the second part of it for the, many people here on the call today, how often have you heard from, what Noah just shared, that you've got folks in your Power BI, your Tableau, your Sigma, you name your BI tool, where you've got report sprawl because you don't necessarily know what people are building. You've got data analysts in different departments building out many different things. And, 5 years ago when you built your first 50 reports and 5 dashboards, well, now it's turned into hundreds, if not thousands. I can tell you all confidently, anecdotally, we have many customers that have several thousand reports. And that happens because you're giving your business users the ability to kind of build out what they want inside of these reports without necessarily controlling governance, but more so monitoring, hey, what are they doing? What are those kind of last mile transformations and things that they're building? So what Noah alluded to is the capability to really monitor what they're doing and understand those requests that we can then bring back into our data engineering and broader data governance function that allows us to have much tighter controls around our data. And now specifically with USLBM, we just for the context is we start with a pilot group because we don't want to go build this for several hundred people day one. We want to go and prove it, test it, roll this out to a couple dozen, 20, 30, 40 people, test it for a couple of weeks, then roll this out. And that's exactly what we did here. And as we started to roll this out, we had some benchmarks around how long did it take to get insights to the business today? And what does that look like 30, 60, 90 days out? So I'm extremely proud to share this and excited to share this because I think many of y'all here will see many of these similar benefits. But the two in particular, I think first and foremost, just inside of a couple of weeks, over 30% of their data ticket requests and volume dropped because we're meeting users with the data that they want at their fingertips. So now John Smith, Northeast regional sales leader, no longer needs to go to Noah to say, hey, can you go get me this report for a meeting first thing tomorrow morning? But rather, he's able to go and ask that question of that data inside of Teams, have that right in front of him to be able to drive a meeting and be proactive and prescriptive coming to a meeting. The second part of it is when we think about the time to insights. That example I just shared a moment ago is somebody coming in, messaging with a data analyst and needing that tomorrow morning. I mean, how often have you all here on the call here have gotten requests or have been the person requesting data and it takes, probably not seconds or minutes, but probably days, hours, or weeks to get the data, to get the updated dashboard, refreshed report, you name it. And there's incredible impact that this can have on your organization to both meet the business where they are, to get them to do more with data at their fingertips, while also providing scale to your data teams more widely. Now, with that, Noah, I'd love for you to take over the screen and start to share and show what this looks like and how some of the folks here on the webinar today can start to think about incorporating this inside of their business.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll go ahead and begin my screen share here. So I'm going to give that a quick sec to load. Now, what we're looking at here is we're looking at an instance of Cortex agents running right inside of MS Teams. As you can see, it exists right here in the chat menu, exactly where I'm already communicating with my teammates and colleagues here at Seven Rivers. So this first example here is showing a couple of suggested questions for this chatbot. So I'm going to start by asking, what are total sales by region? Fairly simple question, and the agent now kicks off the process of answering it. So what it's doing under the hood, it's doing a little bit more than your regular ChatGPT or Claude solution would do. It's parsing the question and generating the SQL to answer it under the hood, which it will return as part of the response. But it's also running the query on a warehouse in the Snowflake environment, which is a really cool process, and it's really convenient and speeds up that questions to insights time in terms of having that right here and being able to do all of that within Teams and not needing to go into Snowflake and build all of that out. So here's a response it's provided showing some sales data by region, a little visualization, and as well as the SQL that it generated and ran. Go ahead and follow up with another question here and ask for it to do something a little bit more complex. So here I'm asking it to do a comparison between what the budget was for Q4 of last year and what the actual sales were for the Chicago market. While this is processing, I should mention that this is mock data generated, so this is not this isn't any actual customer data or sales data or anything. This was generated for the purposes of this demo here. As this is running, I'm going to go ahead and prepare the next question. So as I'm waiting for the response here, one thing that I could do as I'm asking questions is specify what type of visualization I want. As we can see for the previous one, it was able to, Cortex agent was smart enough to determine, based off of the data that was returned, what type of visualization makes the most sense. So looking here, I now have yet another response, and it looks like for this mock company, looks like the sales not looking too great. Let's go ahead and find out if the same trend can be observed in the previous quarter. And what this demonstrates is it recognizes it shows the fact that this conversation, all within MS Teams running on Cortex agents, is a multi-turn conversation. So it's smart enough to recognize the fact that when I ask, what about the quarter before that? It's recognizing that I'm essentially asking the same question that I did before, but just doing a little modification. So instead of, what was it, Q4 of 25, I'm now asking about Q3 of 25. And it's smart enough to have that whole conversation context as it's coming up with answers.
That's great. And Noah, if you scroll up a bit here, I think one of the things that's really helpful, again, thinking about it through, both the sales user point of view and the folks that we spoke with, this is solving for some of those things where they're saying, well, how did sales compare? Which, historically, that's going to be a report that shows actual sales and forecast. Well, now, and maybe we've already got kind of a column or some table that shows the variance, the attainment. But what about transaction volume? That doesn't necessarily show up, but maybe for some purpose of my business. Now I'm like, hey, I want to add transactions to that. So as a sales leader, I would go back to my data analyst or a data engineer, put in a ticket request to say, hey, for this already built report, can you add this field of data or add something to it? And it's great that you're not only able to have that at your fingertips, but also there's some observations. And I think that's a really compelling piece of this that talks about kind of the shortfall, what was the strongest month of the quarter, so on and so forth.
Awesome. Thank you for that added insight, Joe. I think it's a really good perspective to add. And here we have a very similar and a comparison breakdown of Q3 and Q4 now that the agent has come back with an answer. So looks like that quarter was also, for this mock company, not looking too hot. So let me go ahead and ask, why was there such an underperformance for those 2 months? Now, what this is going to do is it's going to think, now this question is a little bit different than the ones I've asked before. This isn't specifically a data request. I'm asking for it to do a why analysis of some of the previously asked questions. And if we look here, the answer is essentially just a rejection of the question. One thing that we did for the USLBM solution was have the agent be smart enough to reject any questions that ask why. The reason for this is that anytime we do ask a agent a question such as this in a natural language querying solution, it will have a tendency to keep asking repeated questions and generating SQL queries over and over until it has a satisfactory answer. And that's something that is better left to the human in that case. And we can even see that it has provided some questions that the user, me, could ask of it to try and get to the bottom of this underperformance. And part of another reason that we added this safeguard, besides the fact that this task is, or answering the why is probably best left to analysts and sales folk, is that there's a potential lot of performance cost in having that agent chase down the solution by generating a query and running it and then not being satisfied with the response, and then generating another query and running it. And that can take a very long time. And anytime you have an agent take too long, that can kind of erode user trust. So that was one intentional constraint that we added to the agent that we built out for USLBM. I'm going to go ahead and follow up with a question about inventory. So far, we've been asking about sales data and getting metrics related to that, and the agent has done an excellent job of writing queries, getting the data, and providing visualizations and breakdowns of those results. And here is yet another constraint that we have built on the agent here, is that there's no inventory data available to this agent. What we want to do is we want to add these safeguards to reject questions that are outside of the scope of the data, to avoid having the agent hallucinate. Because if the Cortex agent had tried to answer this question, it would have been meaningless, if anything harmful to the business, because it would have provided an answer that the user would sort of implicitly trust, given that it's the assumption is that they would use this on the regular. But without inventory data, it obviously can't answer an inventory question. So we want to make sure that the agent knows the scope of what questions it can answer and be smart enough to tell the user when the user asks a question that it doesn't have the data to answer. And finally, last question for the demo, I'm going to ask the agent to provide a 1+3 budget for the MSP market starting from August in 2025. Now, this was one challenge, or answering these types of questions was one particular challenge that we ran into while building out this solution. And the reason for that was that the Cortex agent didn't quite understand what that 1+3 budget term meant. So what we had to do is we had to, within the semantic layer, within the Cortex agent, specify what exactly it means for an X plus Y budget, or what exactly that means when a user asks about an X plus Y budget. So that's a sort of customization at an orchestration and semantics level that we built into this solution so that it can answer these questions that are really specific to the customer terminology. Go ahead and give that another second to run. But it's worth noting that this is one I wanted to highlight, but this isn't the only example where we did that. But it's the one we are highlighting in this demo here. And as we can see, it was able to understand the 1+3 budget view, that being a month of actuals for August, followed by 3 months of what the budget would be. And it gets similar to before. We get a table, some key observations, and a visualization. So that concludes the demo portion of this webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Noah. And hopefully that gave everybody a bit of a view into kind of what the experience could be. Obviously, and you kind of see some of the thinking, the SQL. There's some things that you could think about relative to both capabilities today. What do you want to show relative to thinking, the SQL, the warehouse that it hits? You can think about how that shows up to the user themselves. But more importantly, Nick, I think it's a really good segue to think about and talk about. It's great that this capability exists today, but where's the product going? What is next for Snowflake? What are the things that you're excited to share with the many folks here on the call today that are thinking about this and want to know kind of what's next on the roadmap?
For sure. Thanks, Joe. Noah, that was a really exciting demo. And I just want to emphasize everything that was shown in that demo is not a prototype. That's not a roadmap slide. That is live, production ready, deployable today. So let me ground you in what's available right now and what I want you to take forward, what we want to take forward, or where we're going next. Okay, so what's live today? We have the Semantic Foundation, which is GA. That includes Semantic Views and Semantic View Autopilot, which are both production ready. You can go from a zero to a governed semantic layer in minutes, not in weeks, but in minutes. The agent layer is also GA, so that includes Cortex agents, Snowflake intelligence, and then of course our integration with Microsoft Teams that you just saw in action. All of it, including the SSO and the Entra ID and role-based security, is live and deployable right now. As I mentioned before, think of Cortex agents as the engine, and Snowflake intelligence is the full conversational experience built on top of it, purpose-built for your business users to interact with their data through conversation. Next, what we have in GA also is the connectivity layer. This includes MCP connectors that let your agents read and act across Salesforce, Jira, Gmail, Slack, Google Calendar, your Drive. Your agent can summarize your day, pull relevant docs, draft follow-ups, and post updates, all governed by the Snowflake roles, all logged end-to-end. And that's today. Now let me talk to you about where this is going, because what you saw today is chapter 1. What's coming next is on the right-hand side of your screen. So we have deep research for analytics. This just entered public preview, and this is one of my most exciting features, or one of the features that most excites me. This takes Snowflake intelligence from answering what happened to reasoning through why it happened and what to do about it, producing full-sighted analytical reports across structured and unstructured data. Think of it as giving your agent the ability to do investigative work your best analyst would do, but in seconds. Then we have artifacts, which are also in public preview. Today, when someone has a great conversation with the agent, a useful analysis, a chart workflow, it lives in the chat. Artifacts let you save those and share them with your teams so you can build on each other's work. It turns one-off insights into organizational knowledge. Next, we have Snowflake Intelligence on iOS, which is also in public preview. Your field sales team, your branch managers, anyone on the move can pull up their phone and have the same conversational analytics experience, the insights that travel with them. Now, if we hit enter on the slide, I have a little cute visual that should appear. There we go. So what's next? Where are we going? So everything showed you. So basically, the broader vision. Imagine a Monday morning where your agent has already analyzed the weekend's numbers, flagged the anomalies, drafted the executive summary, and dropped it right into your team's channel before you've even poured your cup of coffee. Not because someone scheduled a report, because the agent understood the rhythm of your business and knew what you needed. Imagine every employee, from C-suite to the branch floor, having a personalized, intelligent teammate that knows their roles, learns their patterns, and proactively surfaces the insight that changes the decisions. The CFO gets margin alerts, the regional manager gets staffing anomalies, the sales rep gets deal risk alerts, all governed, all from the same semantic foundation. One thing we're doing a lot of right now is we're investing heavily in personalization, where Snowflake intelligence learns your preferences and roll over time, so every response gets sharper, more relevant, and more predictive. We're building deeper action-taking capabilities where your agent doesn't just answer questions, but triggers workflows across your entire tool ecosystem. File the tickets, update the forecast, alert the team, close the loop. Not a dashboard, not a report, but a partner, always on, always governed, always learning. We're not just putting analytics where work happens, we're building the future where data does the work. That's the world Snowflake is building. And with partners like Seven Rivers, we're building it now. Back to you, Joe.
Nick, thank you so much. I think that's incredibly exciting to hear. I think more specifically, the Snowflake Intelligence app is one that we have heard from day one. Folks are really excited about, especially with US LBM, as we've talked about. They have many, many users, literally hundreds of users sitting in teams today. That's great. But they also have some folks that are often on the road, in the field, out in front of their customers. And that's no different than if you're a financial service company where you've got bankers, or you're a tech company with sellers on the road, or you've got other people inside of your business that want the ability to leverage this capability, again, meeting users where they're doing work and giving that capability. So that is incredibly exciting, not to mention some of the other items that you just hit on a moment ago in terms of product roadmap. Now we have many questions that have come in, so I'm gonna start to go through one by one, and maybe I'll start at the top, and we'll kind of go between you, Nick, and Noah, and perhaps there's some that each of you could add some color to. But Noah, I think this one might be good for you to answer relative to the USLBM experience here. So the question is, so one thing that was mentioned is that there could be inconsistent metrics, and it's becoming a bigger issue with AI. So why does conversational analytics make that problem more visible?
Yeah, so that can increase the visibility of inconsistent metrics because you simply have more people querying the data, just now with natural language, but instead of writing the SQL themselves. However, one thing that we did to mitigate this issue for the USLBM project was setting up LLM as judge evals for the Cortex agent. What this does is it runs an automated test of the agent by asking it having a task or a procedure, ask it various questions, and use another agent to compare the answers to what was expected. This is something that we can run multiple times and ensure that the agent is consistently answering questions correctly. If we see any that the agent is not answering correctly, then we can dive into the semantic layer and fix any of those inconsistencies before it ever reaches the user.
Thanks for answering that. That's incredibly helpful. Now, there's as Nick, you talked about earlier in the upfront. I think I'm going to point this question to you because it kind of goes to that topic of moving your semantic layer from kind of BI and to the right and moving it to the left inside of Snowflake. So if someone tried to replicate what Noah showed in the demo without the semantic layer, what would break?
I love this question. And it kind of alludes back to the previous question. You're going to get metric inconsistencies. You're going to get different answers. Have you ever wondered why, let's say, an analyst or two different analysts are getting different numbers for revenue? That's because of your semantic layer. Your semantic layer is working the back end, giving those definitions, giving those metrics, creating those dimensions. It is what basically makes sure that your AI doesn't hallucinate. And I think it's extremely important. So without it, everything sort of breaks, but it breaks silently. You won't know that it's even hallucinating. And that's the importance of your semantic layer in today's AI world.
Thank you for that. A couple of other questions that have come in. Let me read the next one here. What connectors do you currently have available today for integration with Outlook, Jira, and Teams? Nick, maybe I'll point that one to you.
So we currently have MCP connectors. I would have to work closer with the team to tell you exactly what they are, but we have MCP connectors for all of those tools.
Great. Thanks. And then another question that came in is one concern that we hear a lot is around security. What actually ensures that users only see what they're supposed to see? Nick, why don't you start from just a broader Snowflake kind of product and platform standpoint, and then Noah, given the USLBM users, Entra ID, the likes of that, maybe you could take the second part of that.
I love this question because one of the reasons why we advocate pushing your semantics left is because it's governed by a Horizon catalog, which is part of Snowflake. And essentially, you're going to get the security features bolted in. It's inherited, sorry, not bolted in on. And essentially, your RBAC, your row-based security, the same securities that you have, the authentication flows and so on, are going to come with it. And that's why this question is something that actually excites me. It's something we do inherently here at Snowflake.
Thanks, Nick. And Noah, why don't you talk about that specific to our customer and the solution here?
Yeah, absolutely. So, like I mentioned before, USLBM is a Microsoft shop, so they use Entra ID for authentication. In order to use that for this MS Teams integration, we used Skim to create every single Entra ID user a user within their Snowflake environment. Now, when that user boots up the Cortex, When that user messages the Cortex agent in MS Teams for the first time, it will ask the user to authenticate and find that Snowflake user account that maps to their Entra ID account. And this is something that the user doesn't need to set up. They don't need to make a Snowflake account or anything. They just log in with their existing Microsoft account. And with that SCIM setup and with that native Entra ID support within Snowflake, it automatically uses that authentication to connect to a Snowflake user account and a role and lets them start asking questions to get insights right in Teams.
Cool. That's super helpful. Thanks for answering that question, Noah. There's another one that came in here. If we're using Snowflake Data Marketplace to create, publish, and manage data products, can you integrate with Teams to search and subscribe to said data products and then interact with the data product using natural language querying inside of Teams? So long question there. Noah, why don't you start?
Yeah, short version, yes. So one thing that you can do there is there's a feature called Cortex knowledge extensions. This is something that can be added to a Cortex agent straight from Marketplace. It's arguably even simpler than creating a semantic layer, because one option that you would be to have that semantic layer built into it, or you could build your own. But you can add it as what's called like I said, a Cortex knowledge extension to the agent. So short version, yes, absolutely.
Very good. Thanks for that. We've got a couple more questions here. So folks, please feel free to continue to add them into our chat here. They're incredibly helpful. Thank you for all the questions. All right, here's the next one. If a customer wanted to extend this beyond just the natural language Q&A in Teams, but into a pre-scheduled set of questions, queries, and prompts, how would they do that? Noah, you mentioned before relative to Snowsite and some of the things that you're setting up. Maybe you could touch on that, and then Nick, I'll have you add color again back to where the product's going and platform is today even.
Yeah, so speaking to what's currently built in, within Teams, there is a feature where you can send a scheduled message. What you need to do is you need to right-click the send message button instead of left-click it, and it'll give you an option to schedule it for a date and time. That's not the most powerful. It is a one-time thing, and you can't really automate that. If you really wanted to, if you wanted to have an automated workflow where questions are asked of a Cortex agent and you have responses handed right to you, there is an API available for any of the Cortex agents that you build. So you could build yourself a custom solution, such as a bot in Slack, or you could build your own custom Teams bot. Those are all options, but it requires development time. Though the option is, of course, still there if you need something custom built and something automated for your specific use case.
Great. Thanks, Noah. Nick.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think there's a couple ways to do this. And then to Noah's point, you can definitely use Cortex agents APIs in order to schedule those notifications or those questions or queries or prompts. But the second thing you can do is you can utilize those features that I said are currently in public preview, such as deep research. You can use that to do the deep research on the back end, to prepare the prompts, and then use artifacts to share it across your team. So I think using all the tools that we have together, along with these APIs, you can create this forward-looking agent that sort of is more proactive than reactive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's incredibly helpful. Thanks. We still have a few more questions coming in here, so I'll ask a few more. So is the end goal to replace traditional ways that reports are generated and consumed? I'll maybe take that first piece of it. I think something that we see inside of our business, this is I love this question. It's somewhat philosophical in what we're talking about day in, day out with customers. So it excites me to sit here and talk about it. Yeah, I think the broader question is that AI and these types of capabilities, we believe that the capability is not to replace people, but certainly to augment them and give them scale, give them the ability, whether you're a sales individual like the folks we've talked about here, or more so data architects and engineers that are working to build out your data foundation, to work on data quality and deliver data and insights faster. So we certainly do not see BI going away in its entirety, because I could speak again firsthand for myself, but also the many companies that we're working with on these capabilities, is there are always some reports and dashboards that fill a function inside of the business, but rather how do we augment their thinking, their ability to interrogate and get insights from data in a different way. So as part of that, we believe that as that semantic model moves into Snowflake, we move it to the left, and we can help companies really kind of wrap their arms around and control the report sprawl that we've seen. I alluded to it and mentioned it earlier in our webinar. We see so many companies struggle with the endless reports and what's what and what's the kind of right report that I should use. So don't see it going away, but rather augmenting the team and helping deliver insights in just a fundamentally different way. Nick, would love your point of view there as well.
That's a great question. Honestly, I think one of the cool things about AI is it just speeds up the work. It's sort of what Noah said. We want the human in the loop. We're not trying to get rid of the human. We're just trying to make you be able to do more things with the time you have than you could have done before. I think AI is supposed to enhance your work and not take away certain aspects of it. That would be my response.
Great. Thank you. All right, we've got a few minutes left here, and so a couple more questions coming in. So I'll ask the next one. Does my semantic view need to be updated each time that the raw data beneath it changes, or does Cortex Analyst handle schema drift? And what does that look like from a version control standpoint? Noah, I'll point it to you first, and then Nick, please feel free to add your point of view.
Yeah, this is a really good question. So the easy answer is it depends, because of course it depends. But to answer the question, addressing some specific types of schema drift. So let's say, for example, one of the tables that the semantic layer is on top of has columns added. This won't break anything, but the Cortex agent won't know about those columns since it doesn't have that in the semantic layer. You need to go in and add them. If any, let's say a column is modified, like renamed or the data type is changed, that would cause an issue. It's the same as if one is removed. However, there is a feature baked right into the Snowsite UI where Cortex will have AI generated suggestions. So if an issue does come up or if new columns are added, it will say, hey, it's not going to change it for you, but it will say, hey, look, the schema's drifted. Here are some suggested changes to address that. Do you want to apply these changes? So there's a little human in the loop element to make sure that it's not changing without, someone's looking in and giving it the go ahead. Regarding version control, so the way that I think right now most people work on their semantic layer is right within the Snowsite UI. But if you want to integrate version control, you can do this programmatically with, say, in like a VS Code IDE and run SQL that will push the updates to the semantic view right to your Snowflake environment without needing to use the UI. And once you're working in either a YAML file or a or SQL, you have both. You can either modify a YAML file and push that configuration, or you can have a large SQL statement to create or alter a semantic view, as the object is called. And that, with it being a YAML file or SQL, is something you can easily check into your whatever version control system you use. Nick, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
The only thing I wanted to add was that Semantic View Autopilot gives you those suggestions on the right-hand side, the panel. And like you mentioned, it is keeping the human in the loop. It will tell you those suggestions based on the schema changes, and you have the option of adding them. You can even test them before you add to see exactly what would the response be. This way, you at least get to verify for yourself before blindly accepting an AI's recommendations. I think that makes it much quicker to handle such changes and simplifies time. And I wasn't kidding when I said that creating semantic views went from taking weeks to now a matter of minutes with Semantic View Autopilot. I've seen it firsthand. I highly advise everyone on here to try using Semantic View Autopilot and see what their real thoughts are on it.
Thank you, Nick and Noah, for that one. We've got, I think, one more question for now. Noah, you talked about this during your demo, so I'll point it at you. Since you're staying away from the why, at least for now, what is the scope for predictive analytics?
That's a really good question, because being able to answer a why question in Cortex agents would provide value if you take the time to engineer it to do that in an efficient manner. So in my mind, there are two ways to tackle this. The first one would be to set up some traditional ML or predictive analytics setup on the side and have an output table with those results available in the semantic layer. So in that case, the Cortex agent wouldn't be doing any of the predictive analytics itself, but it would have access to the output of some other prediction engine that you have running elsewhere in your Snowflake environment. The second way to do it would be to give the Cortex agent a machine learning model or something, or some other prediction engine give it to the Cortex agent as a tool. So to get a little bit into the technical details without going too deep, the way that the Cortex agent is able to generate SQL is it has a tool called Cortex Analyst, which is essentially one sub-agent or tool that it has to answer user questions. And you can add more tools on top of that, and the agent will be smart enough to know which tool to use to answer the question. So you can have, say, your Cortex Analyst for when you just want to write SQL based off a natural language question. And you can also add some predictive analytics solution in there that the Cortex agent can call, right? So basically, it would route the question, maybe reformat it a little bit in a way that your prediction model can understand, get an answer out of it, and then send that back to the user, right? So those are the two ways in my mind to capture that using existing technology that's available in the Cortex stack.
Very good. Thank you, Noah. Nick, anything that you'd like to add there?
And nothing to add from my perspective. I think Noah answered it perfectly. One thing that I do want to say, though, before we end the webinar is that we do have Snowflake Summit coming up soon, and there's going to be a lot of exciting features announced there around semantic views and our Cortex agents as well. So stay tuned for that.
Very good. And that's certainly something we're excited about with Summit coming up. We're excited to be a sponsor there. So for all of you joining today, asking questions, spending nearly an hour with us, genuinely, thank you so much. We love sharing the work of our customers and getting a chance to join webinars like this and have folks like Nick on with their thoughtful insight, connection to the product, and hear where it's going. For those of you that are interested in better understanding how we might be able to help bring this capability or support your efforts, feel free to reach out, and we look forward to meeting you all, hopefully in person at Summit in a few weeks. Have a good rest of your day, and thanks again.